I don't think so. She's not coming. Okay, do I have anyone on the telephone lines? Okay. Seeing there are none, David will be along, but I think we can start without that. Call to order and rise. And I'll ask you to stand for the singing of O Canada.
Be my new hearing aids because I have to sing. Is that you?
And before I ask the director to do roll call, I'd like to say happy Valentine's Day to everyone. And if you have any of your significant others who are tuning in, I will take the blame for it. Okay, so just say it's not my fault, it was the chair's fault, and I'll take full blame for each and every one of you tonight, okay? Happy Valentine's Day, significant others. Director, roll call, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, trustees. This is our roll call for our meeting of 14th February 2018. Trustee Arm.
Present.
First Vice Chair Karkner.
Present.
Trustee Cram.
Present.
Trustee Jacobs.
Present.
Trustee Wendy McPherson. Trustee Bill McPherson.
Present.
Trustee McAllister.
Present.
Second Vice Chair McDonald.
Present.
Chair McMillan.
Present.
Trustee Richards.
Present.
Trustee Swan. Student Trustee Marshall Wilson.
Present.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Director. I need a motion that the Upper Canada District School Board approve consent agenda item 3.02 to 03, February 14th, 2018 as submitted. Moved by Trustee Karkner, seconded by Trustee Bill McPherson. I ask you to cast your votes, please. And that carries. Trustee McDonald, you're in?
Yeah.
Thank you. Do I have any conflict of interest declarations? Seeing there are none, moving on to a report from private session, January 24, 2018. I need a motion from that. That the Upper Canada District School Board approve Resolution PS 218, January 24th-002, carried in Committee of the Whole private session under Agenda Item D.1, January 24th, 2018. Moved by Trustee Karkner, seconded by Trustee Cram. Thank you. I should have cast your votes. It's going to be a tough night, I can tell. I apologize because it was Valentine's Day, didn't I? Okay. And that carries. Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to move on. We have two delegations to school presentations tonight. The first presentation is Lagan Public School, and I'm going to ask Superintendent Val Allen if she'll introduce Principal Charbonneau.
It's with pleasure that I welcome Principal Jennifer Charbonneau to come to the table. And Jennifer's going to share with us the wonderful story of Lagan Public School. It's our most northern school in the Glengarry County, and if you've ever been in the school, you know you get an automatic sense of, first of all, community, and secondly, about commitment to learning, and that's what Jennifer's going to share with us tonight. So welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you for the opportunity to highlight my school. So we serve about 167 students, and we offer both immersion and the regular program. We have about 22 staff, including myself. We have 32 students presently who have an IEP, and 8 of those students are receiving the Empower program, so they require an IEP. Generally, all the students feed into GD. Really, they don't typically go anywhere else unless they've moved. It was built in 1969, and recent renovations included a roof a few years ago. However, there's big plans for this summer, asphalt, new configuration for the busing, new doors for accessibility requirements, new school lettering to keep it with the new branding of the board, and replacing some sidewalks. So we're looking forward to that. We have a very, very active school council. We have a coordinator of the volunteers who coordinates the volunteers. So for instance, if the kindergarten class is having a tea or something, the teacher would call the coordinator, and the coordinator then would call the bakers, who then would bake for the event. And we have like a list of volunteers that do reading in English and French. And so this coordinator coordinates all these people who have said they've come to volunteer. So it's really dynamic. We have a before and after school program. It's run by GIAC out of Alexandria. And we have vibrant community partners. We buy all our breakfast program items, our snack bins, and most recently school clothing from local businesses. So this is our reading and writing and problem solving. From the primary assessment to the junior assessment, our students maintain and significantly, in some cases, improve their scores. So you can see in 2013-14 in reading, the primaries, they scored an 83, and the cohort then in grade 6 scored 100. So by 100, I mean that 100% of the students were either scoring at a level 3 or 4. And that's pretty much the same story in writing. The cohort in 13-14 was scored at an 88, and made significant improvements again. In the junior, they were scoring at 100%, levels 3 or 4. Mathematics, when they were in grade 3, they scored at an 89 and made some improvements to 95. Sorry, I can't see that. And the cohort from the primary math in 2013-14 scored 77, and 86% of the students were scoring at a level of 3 or 4 by the time they hit grade 6. Right now, we're in the second cycle of inquiry in the area of literacy, and we're working on refining our success criteria, and we're working on supporting open responses where the students have to think. So that seems to be over time where we have difficulty. So the immersion program, the primary students are working on an open response, success criteria for the open response, and the juniors and grade 3 students and up are working on a written response. So that's what our success criteria is based on right now, and that changes over time. For instance, what's expected of a grade 3 student at the beginning of grade 3 is not what we expect at the end of grade 3. So that's why we're continually starting to refine that. Also across the school, we use the APE strategy when they're working on open response questions. So the A is answer it, the P is prove it, the E is explain it. They also added S. The S in the primary division is super writing, so capitals, good spelling, periods, clear sentences. And in the junior division, it becomes specific, so that they're using specific words from the text to support their answers. In math, we're working on problem solving. Typically, historically as well, there's some difficulties with the open response questions. That's when they don't have a choice to choose from. If they're solving a problem, they don't have a multiple choice, so they have to do it all on their own. So we've taken the template that was shared with us at the RMS days, the math days, And so we've started off with our original data without the support of a template. And we've introduced the template, and we've had a second go of data with the template, and there's been significant improvement. I don't have those numbers right in front of me. But what the template does is it supports them fully right now. And there's 4 or 5 different templates. So the next template would take away the pictures. The next template would just have the words. The next template would just have the shapes of the box. And finally, they end up with a blank sheet, exactly what they would see at EQAO. So it's just gradually reducing that support so that when they get to that blank page on the EQAO testing, there's no surprises. So we asked our junior students in January how they manage stress, and they were able to tick off anything that they do. And you can see that 55% talk to friend, 50% deep breathe, 39% listen to music, 30% play sports, 29% talk to a caring adult, and 20% go for a walk. We have 70 minutes of activity a day. 30 of it is instructional, so they're in the gym 30 minutes every day. And they have 2 20-minute outdoor play, so they have 70 minutes of being active. We've had an application in right now to AFIA for a healthy school certification, focusing on intramurals. One thing that's new to the school for the last 2 years is the grade 6s doing the morning announcements, so giving them some student voice. They work with me as well for special spirit days that we have. Several of the classes have been introduced to MindMasters by our student support partner, and that's a program that was developed by the Child and Youth Health Network and CHIO. And it's short videos, usually listening videos, where they're learning techniques to reduce their stress, calm down. And so we've brought that now into the school. I actually used it today in my office with a student. So it's working, and they seem to calm down and enjoy it. Our next steps, of course, is to identify a goal for our SIPSA in terms of wellness. And that's my presentation.
Thank you very much. I know your trustee is Trustee Wendy McPherson, and Wendy McPherson has just got back from out west, so I will speak on her behalf. I know that she would be very proud of your school. I know she'd probably focus in what she would say about the school, not only about the academic achievement, but she would be very pleased with the involvement of the school council and the volunteers in the school, because I think when you look at from her point of view, and I'm certainly from all of our point of view, when you get an active school council and you get a lot of volunteers in the school, it goes hand in hand with the achievement of the kids. So I think she'd be very proud of what's happening. I don't always speak for Wendy, but I think I can speak for Wendy on that. So thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to open up for comments or questions. Trustee Bill McPherson.
Just a comment. I really don't have any questions. You seem to be doing a lot of things right. I'm very impressed with your score, especially in the area that so many other schools are showing weaknesses is in the math. Whatever you're doing it right. But I'm quite impressed with those numbers.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any Trustee John McAllister.
Jennifer, I wonder if you could review for me the last reference that you made to the wellness goal and the partnership that you have with, is it a local organization?
Oh, through you, Chair? Are you talking about the MindMasters?
Yes.
No, that was, it's a program. If you Google it, you'll see, you could come up with the videos. So it's a program or initiative with the Children's Hospital of Eastern Ontario and the Child and Youth Health Network. And they've paired together and come up with these. It's called MindMasters. There's actually MindMasters 2 as well now. So if you Google it, you'll see some of the strategies that children learn. We did spaghetti toes, we did jelly belly, and we did our special place. So if you Google any of that, you'll be able to hear and see it.
Okay, thank you.
What was the first one? Spaghetti?
Spaghetti toes.
Okay.
Through you, Chair, and if I can just add, our board is actually part of a research project with CHIO on Mind Masters, and it's one of our evidence-based proven programs that we use in many of our schools. But we are involved in a research project for Mind Masters 1 with our school board and CHIO.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to our next school, South Grenville District High School, and I'm going to ask Superintendent Ferguson if he'll introduce the South Grenville team who've been waiting patiently.
Thank you, Chair. It's my pleasure to welcome to the table Principal Guy Lamarche, Vice Principal Ian Morris, and Vice Principal Cami Link. And as they make their way up, I'll tell a very quick story. On the first day of school, as everyone knows, several of our schools ended up without power, and South Grenville was one of those schools. It was not the facilities department's fault at all. I'm looking at Jeremy to make sure I mention that. It was a transistor that blew. When I showed up at the school to see if they needed any help, other than the fact that there was a few hundred cell phones with lights on, other than that, you wouldn't have noticed that it was anything other than a regular first day of school. The team was very calmly directing students to classrooms and making arrangements to feed all the students with leftovers from the grade 7 and 9 orientation, greeting people as they came in. I turned to Guy and I said, "Do you need anything?" And he said, "No. Do you want a coffee?" And I thought, wow, there's someone with some experience in this role, a steady hand, and was confidently handling that situation, and his team was as well. And he's worked very hard to pass on his knowledge to his two vice principals, who are a bit newer than Principal Lamarche. And I'll now turn it over to them and let them share all the great things that they're doing at their school.
Through you, Chair. So we're going to start with basically our presentation is called Community School Preparing Students for a Successful Life. And I'll ask Cami to set up a school profile.
Through you, Chair. Thank you, Guy. So like Mr. Ferguson said, I'm a new vice principal. I've worked at South Grenville for 1 month, just to give you some perspective. And South Grenville is located in Prescott, just off the 401, in between Iroquois and Brockville. And it's a great facility, a really big school, lots to offer. There's 520 students approximately. 360 of them are in secondary and 160 in intermediate. And we offer regular and immersion programming. And we have many great community partnerships and ties, like to name some, Relay for Life, the Connect Youth Program, the Spirit of Giving, King's Kitchen, Craft Fair, and the Cadets.
Thank you, Cami. So there's 3 themes to the presentation. It's about solid pathways, sense of belonging, and transferable skills. And we'll move on. So the EQAO, if you've noticed a few of the data, that with the math, applied math, we're trending upwards with the 31% last year, which is only 4% off the board. And we're very happy about that because we're trying to get at least a board average. The academics also climbed, and with the literacy, we've been stabilized, and again, getting closer to the board average. Graduation rate, there's no data for 2017 yet, but 2015 we're at 74%, 2016 79%, and that to increase that to a level that would be above board average, we have 3 different areas. One is our student success plan. Our whole premise is ownership, not rescue. So we're trying to not enable negative skills and to focus on the things that will help students succeed at any level when they leave our building. Because sometimes some of them just want to be rescued, where we're trying to say, take ownership, we'll support you, but we want you to have the skills to succeed without those supports when you move on. So we differentiate our plan depending on the student's grade, whether they're at risk or not, and we really try and, again, enable them to be independent learners. Secondly is our partnership with TR Léger. We have a lot of students, especially that are 18 plus, that only need a couple credits, but they need flexibility. Some of them work. Some of them we're behind in credits, and we try and focus on things like a PLAR. And so the partnership with TR Léger is quite good, and a lot of our 18-year-olds will try and work with us to find the best pathway possible for them to graduate within that 5-year cohort. The last thing is a commitment to strong pathways. We're at 360 in secondary, and some people would consider that small, but it depends how you look at it. We know every student, which is really, really nice. Second thing is we've made a commitment to ensure that we have 3 pathways. The workplace pathways is one that we take care of. So we offer essential programming as well as workplace programming, and ensuring that it's an engaging pathway. So students out of grade 11 don't want to just say, I'm going to the world of work and I don't need a diploma. We want to make sure that they understand that it's a really good thing and they'll get the skills to succeed in the workplace. College and trades, we've got a great pathway. We have 2 SHISMs right now, hospitality and transportation, and we've applied for a third. It's very exciting because construction electrical, which will be great, and there's a real demand for those areas. Plus we offer hairstyling, not as a SHISM, but as a program. We started it with the grade 9s again this year, and now we've had 3 sections for next year. We may not be able to offer that many sections because our hairstyling teacher is a co-op teacher as well, but we'll work that out. It's a positive thing. And also the academic stream is really important. We've committed to offering in-class 4Us, and we found a way to be able to do all those things together. And it's really helped a lot of students stay in our building instead of saying, well, I'd rather go to a bigger school that can offer more courses. No, you can get those courses at South Grenville. The SIPSAs. So our goal is, as stated, basically is to improve to 75% this year, which would be around the board average. We're focused on inferencing, which is one of the hardest things for students to grasp. So our whole premise is, as the SIPSA is organized, is monitor and adjust. We've had also a linked literacy test, and we're very happy to see that the Gap Literacy Initiative has started up again. We had a meeting on Monday. We were part of the initiative last year, and it was very, very helpful, especially in terms of reading. Our OSLT prep, we practice tests with the grade 9s the same day as the grade 10s. And from that information, we're able to have individual meetings with each student, which we had in December. And that explains to students where they need to focus their efforts individually. They like to hear it too as well. They want to know where they need to work harder because they really do want to pass. We also offer the after-school literacy program, and we have people that sign up for it. And that's after school, an extra 10 hours of support. We have Good for All remedial and work, and as well for students that, let's say, had difficulty with one specific aspect, we offer also focus groups to help support those students. First semester they had their English courses for grade 10. A lot of the work was done there. Second semester is all about cross-curricular. So they're going to be getting some more information, literacy building skills to be able to succeed on the literacy test, which is April 10th.
Okay, thank you,
Mr.
Guy.
Morris will talk, Ian Morris, and we'll talk about the math SIPSA.
Great, thank you, Guy. As Guy mentioned earlier, we are trending upwards. We did improve last year. That being said, we are hungry for more, for sure. And in fact, we would love to hit the provincial average in the years to come. When we met as a SIPSA a year and a half ago, we were looking at our numbers, and we decided as a team that we needed to focus on high yield, high impact teacher-based strategies in order to improve quickly. We really wanted to improve the culture, ownership as far as teachers and students went, and we really wanted to include more student voice, student discourse, and hoped that all of that would tie together into improved academic achievement. On the slide you see a couple of bullets there, 5 of them in fact, and those sort of highlight some of those bigger ideas that we chased. As far as the accountable talk goes, that comes from Lucy West. It's a series of talk moves that move student discourse and talking from a passive stance more to an active stance. If you believe that learning occurs in a social context, if students are doing the talking, then they're doing the learning. In fact, if students are doing the talking, the teacher then has an opportunity to do the listening, so they can assess for learning, think about what they do the next day, or perhaps how they're going to type our lesson, or maybe in 5 minutes leverage the strengths and the things that they've heard right then and there and tie in the lesson of the day. Growth mindset, we're using that right now in our current SIPSA rotation. That's from Carol Dweck and Joe Bowler. It's a series of moves that tries to get students to realize that they're not fixed in their ability to learn math, in fact, that they can grow. It creates a nice classroom environment where they feel free to take risks, and mistakes are normal, right? It's a pathway to learning. Further on the teacher side, we want to make, from the teacher work side, we want to make sure our teachers their moves are in line with the growth mindset, and they're not undoing some of the things that they're preaching in terms of the growth mindset. From the RMS days, we are also looking at increasing the use of manipulatives. Grade 7, 8, and 9 students, they're often transitioning to abstract thinking and reasoning. However, many of the students are still based in concrete ways of learning. So the manipulatives, for example, whether it's algebra tiles or perhaps Cuisinart rods for fractions, or maybe virtual manipulatives on the smartboard, allows them to play with the math and actually see the math concepts being proved or disproved right in front of them with the physical items. Resilient teams, yes, we're looking for resilient classrooms with the students and the teacher, but we want our teachers working together as well. Over the last year and a half, we've had grade 9 teachers come into grade 7 and 8 classrooms and practice their moves there. Likewise, we have our grade 7 and 8 teachers working with our high school teachers to see perhaps where the curriculum is going and what they need to focus on, and perhaps align some of their languages, some of their tools. One exciting thing I noticed with the math teams is this year we're starting to get some of our grade 7 and 8 teachers so excited with what they're starting to do. They're trying to bring other teachers in and spread out some of that knowledge. So that's the next phase in terms of making it resilient, so when perhaps we go at some point, it continues on without us. And lastly, the SST approach. Yes, we're trying to move away from just providing the instruction and then having them receive it, but what happens if it doesn't work? And then, have some precision, right? So if we happen to get a snow day, how can we use that time? Perhaps we can meet up with the teachers and go down the class list one by one. How's this student doing? How's that student doing? Oh, I'm noticing you're telling me they're all having a difficulty with a certain concept. Maybe we can use these tools. Maybe we need to look at an IEP, right? And so we can just go and really be a little bit more robust with our class lists. So that's our math.
Thanks, Ian. That's fantastic. So the next slide is the last two slides are really important to us. I think we've done a lot of great work with student wellness and student voice. I'm going to talk a little bit about some data, and I want you to understand where it's coming from. So the first one, Tell Them From Me, is based basically on the 2016 and 2017 information, and it's all, we refer to a Canadian norm. So when we talk about we're above or below, that's we're referencing, they give us you a Canadian norm, and you can kind of say, okay, where are we at with that Canadian norm? So the first one, anxiety and depression. The board and our school are above the Canadian norm. So that's something that's really concerning. And I remember we went to the Tell Them From Me day, which was fantastic. Each school brought teams of kids there, and we talked about the information and what can we do at our schools. What do you like about your school? It was an excellent opportunity to start working on how do we change that trend. The interesting part about South Grenville is the next one is interest and motivation. We are above the Canadian norm, which is a positive thing. So the kids, even though they might be high in anxiety and depression, they're not. They're invested in their education. That's a very positive thing to see on the Tell Them From Me. And Tell Them From Me is all student-based. Truancy, again, another one that would dictate that they're not disengaged. We're better than the Canadian norm in terms of kids. This is the kids feeling that kids attend our school. They don't skip out. So again, the positive trend. And the third one was an open question about caring adults. And once more, they say they really feel connected to the adults in the building. So although anxiety and depression might be up like the board average, that we feel there's already the things in place that will help us in achieving to lower that phenomenon. The second thing is the culture scan. A culture scan is based on, we do it with staff, so all staff, QP, EDFO, LCF, and it talks about what I've indicated is level 3 or 4 responses. That's how the staff feels about the school and what we're doing. So level 3 or 4 means they're very supportive. They think we're doing the right thing. So that's how we look at that data. So when we ask the question on the culture scan, this is a board culture scan, how do we feel about how we're doing for student well-being? 100% of the staff responded at level 3 or 4. They feel that we're doing things. They're part of it and they want to be involved. So we'll talk a little about the strategies that we do at our school. First one is on that culture scan again. When we first did it in 2015, December 2015, 64% of the staff felt we offered a lot of variety in activities. The next year, it jumped to 82%. So we focus on that 64. It's not enough. What else can we do to engage those kids? Kids that are engaged do better at school. We all know that. So what we offered, Nerd Club, hairstyling clubs, Connect Youth, not just your sports and drama, we've got a wide variety. And Candy mentioned Connect Youth. We're the only school that has that partnership, and it's absolutely fantastic. And if you're not sure what it is, it's community-based, community-funded, and they're basically, it's like a youth club within the school, and they serve quite a few students. What I noticed about South Grenville, you rarely see anybody by themselves. They have a place to go, and that's also very important. The next thing is student voice, the Tell Them For Me team we brought. We brought kids that have struggled at some points, or they were really understand, they were intuitive to how the student population feels about their depression, anxiety. So they came in there, and if you see a little, you can't see it very well, but I'll explain what that exercise was. They talked about, the exercise was, what do you think is positive about your school? The top three that kept coming over, the same themes were, number one, supportive community, bonus. Number two, mental health escapes. There's places and supports there for us to be able to escape when we do have mental health issues. Number three, student leadership is encouraged. Those were their words and how they saw the school. Other common themes that came through was school pride and staff-student relationships. The third thing that we're really focused on for student wellness and student voice is the mental health task force. I'm not sure if other schools do that, but we have a group team. So there's the guidance counselors, including the new rural guidance counselor, as well as our student support worker, our special service counselor, myself, and we meet together and we have a one-note system where everybody sees it's right away on a dime. We know with every student in the building that has been referred to us what supports they're getting. And that includes community supports, in-school supports. So there's never a question that says, who are they seeing now? Like, are they seeing someone we know? So whether it's a Canadian Mental Health from Leeds and Grenville, if it's the service counselor that comes in once a week at our school, we know who they're tied to. And we find out, is the case closed or not? It's a great way to make sure that nobody falls through any cracks. Finally, the last slide, I've been talking a lot, is kind of they said something you're proud of. Basically, how do we know we've had growth? How do we know we're going in the right direction? So we focus, our vision is ownership and resiliency. That's what we want for the kids. So ownership in layman's term for the students is step up. I mean, come up, be part of your education. Resiliency is push through. That's how we talk to them. Step up and push through. So how do we know? Student leadership. Student leadership, without student leadership, your school will not prosper. When they feel they're empowered, your school will shoot up. Relay for Life. We raised $40,000 last year for Relay for Life. I think it was the majority of what the board had raised came from our school. We had the leadership of Chef Brandy Donovan, but you can't do something to that extent without student leadership. Our Remembrance Day assembly this year is on the weekend. So we were going to do something small, and the students said, no, we need to do something big, and they organized it themselves. Holiday Christmas assembly, all organized by students, so that's a positive thing. Academic ownership. They are taking things seriously. Our practice literacy test had the best results we've had in a while because they know that guides on how we can prepare them for the literacy test. That's ownership. So there's a few more, but I'll move on. Staff involvement. So again, going back to Culture Scan. A few years ago, they talked about how comfortable are you talking about curriculum to the admin team? That's a question on the Culture Scan. 57% had level 3 or 4. It shot up the next year to 83%. How do they feel? How do they know the success plan? Are they comfortable with it? 48% to 73%, trending in the right direction. And finally, do you feel the community is involved? And how can we involve the community? 54 to 77%. That's the staff talking. That's a positive thing. School council, from 3 members, we have 10 this year. That's another positive trend. So that's how we know the trending. The final thing is, what's the work left to do? We have a good collaboration for SIPSAs, but we still, according again to the Culture Scan, they still feel sometimes we don't have enough collaborative teams. It's gone from 40% to 60%, but 60% is still low. They still feel sometimes they work in isolation. We got to change that number a little bit. And finally, skill building. The mental health, great to have supports, but you got to give kids skills. You don't want to just have a bandage solution and say, we're going to take care of you. You can hear is, how can we help you so you don't need to access the supports as often? And that's the work we're going to be doing in the next year. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Trustee Armour, you wanted to ask a question? Open it up with you.
Sure, we'll open up with me. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Welcome.
So, thank you for your presentation. That was fabulous. I was engaged, like you talked about. So I got a question for you around your do you survey your staff, just you guys, just as a leadership team, and then provide feedback to the staff?
Through you, Chair. So it is, the culture scan was mandated a few years ago, and it's a tool that is actually already created.
Okay.
And I've used it at Glengarry in my previous schools, because if you look at it through the years, you'll be able to see trends. So when they say that they don't know what the vision of the school is, well, that raises a red flag. So then you hope that the next year, when they respond to this survey, that it's gone up. If not, you've got more work to do. And that's how I know, and that's the staff, how they feel about the school.
Yeah, yeah.
So I can continue?
Certainly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So that's fabulous. So the big thing that as leaders we always worry about is not staff taking that data and saying, hey, we're not doing a good job. How do you ensure that you build on the negativity to build positive momentum as a leader?
Through you, Chair. So what happens is that there's always something to work on. So again, it goes back to a growth mindset. So once you see something trend up, you kind of try and focus on something else, but you can't forget about the thing that was trending up as well. And you need to make it that it's prevalent. So staff meetings, even student assemblies, we tell the students, this is what we're working on. This is what we're doing for you. And the next thing also, I didn't mention it, was assessment, another piece that we're working on. Well, the students are going to know. So they can actually say, okay, well, no, my teachers are working on this. I understand why there's something different. So it's really making it prevalent and keep focusing on it. And it does help.
So just encourage, managerial courage is good, and I see that. That's fabulous that you're doing that.
Thank you.
So good work.
Thank you. Other comments or questions? Trustee McAllister.
I just don't know whether I want to go back to school as a student or as a teacher after school. I was looking on, followed you on Twitter, and there was some reference to the talking stick program, or the talking stick workshop. You know anything about that? Could you explain it?
It's news to me. Sorry, through you, Chair. The talking stick program.
Is
Was
it not something to do with iLead?
Oh, the ILEAD students.
Oh, okay. Yes. Well, was it board generated, or is it through the school?
I thought it was on your school site.
Yeah, well, sometimes what they'll do is they'll post things on our Facebook.
They take control.
And then say that basically, yes, kind of, you know.
Trustee McAllister, we can get some more clarity on this. I'll just turn it over.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. So the workshop that you're referring to actually took place today, and it was taking place with our iLead students from right across the district, and we had a very engaging Métis speaker in who was telling stories, cultural stories for our students in the morning, and then in the afternoon they did participate in the creation of their own talking stick under his leadership and guidance. So that was taking place today with representation from right across the district.
Thank you.
Through you, Chair.
Sorry, I didn't mean to sandbag you.
No, not at all, not at all. Through you, Chair.
Yes.
Jackie Henry took some students today to that as well. I just didn't know it was iLead or not, but as we've taken part in those workshops before, and they're fantastic. So we do have a nice group from our school that attends.
And that just shows what Twitter does, right? Like Twitter sometimes is ahead of even the staff. As some people know. Thank you. Trustee Cartner.
Through you, Chair, I'm congratulate your team. It looks like there's certainly involvement by the three of you at all times in that school. You know what's going on, and I'm quite impressed with the presentation that was made. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions? Seeing there are none, thank you very much, and I think you can get home in time too. Yeah. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you. I couldn't be serious the whole time.
All right, moving on to the next item, which is the annual Occupation Health and Safety Report, and I'm going to turn this over to Superintendent Backstrom, who's going to introduce Dennis Cullen to us.
Thank you. Excuse me. I just wanted to introduce Dennis Kulik, who's our health and safety specialist. And I just wanted to start off by saying I was talking to Dennis before the meeting, and we were saying how much health and safety, we're exposed to it so much, it permeates our life, and we tend to use it elsewhere other than just in the workplace. And Dennis recounted a story where he had actually been going into a retail outlet, and he was walking by and he saw a youth that was using a weed eater on the lawn. And he was doing it, and he's holding his head away from it, looking the other way, and doing this. He said, well, that's not the way you do it. You know, that's a health and safety problem. Went over and asked the young man if he had glasses, safety glasses. He says, no. He says, where's your boss? Takes him, walks him into the maintenance room, and introduces himself to his boss, and says, this young man's out there doing the weed eater without safety glasses. His boss says, well, he should have safety glasses. And he gets some safety glasses. Dennis goes on his way, the youth goes on his way, but at least he's not going to have an eye injury. So I accused Dennis of being passionate about health and safety, and he agreed. So now I'm going to give you this passionate person to introduce our annual health and safety report.
Thank you.
All right, so let's make me blush here. So I'll be covering the health and safety, occupational health and safety report for 2016 and 17. So through you, Chair. Reviewing some of the 2016 priority actions that we took place last year during that school year and some of the things that we accomplished. We're going to talk about the results from that school year as far as our health and safety or accident results. Hit some highlights, some learning points that we learned during that year too, and we moved into this current year. And then we're going to share some of our action plans for this current year, some things we're working on this year. So to review some of the action plans for 2016, we're going to focus, looking to focus on some of the monthly health and safety inspection programs. That was one of our key things that we looked at last year, right? And again this year too. But one of our key things, not only is it legislated that we have to do monthly workplace inspections, but it's legislated for a reason, right? It's very important to take place in the workplace. The more hazards we can correct in the workplace, the less chance we have of accidents. And so that's why last year and this year we're focusing on that. But I'll get into that in a bit here. So again, we continued our program. Some of the actions looked at was continue our programs to address slips, trips, and falls in the workplace, aggressive tendencies in the workplace, ergonomics, and also overexertions, and struck by and against. And how we did that, some of the progress we saw was communicated our accident causation and performance to schools, so allows them to focus on what the main hazards are in the workplace. So we looked at the reports we did last year, right? And they'll get this one this year too. One of the things we spent a lot of time on was slips, trips, and falls, and how to address slips, trips, and falls in the workplace. We looked at methods to track our monthly health and safety inspections and the program performance at the school levels. We looked at we also had a board's professional activity day, and we were lucky enough to be able to put some safety topics into that day. And again, we looked at slips, trips, and fall hazards, preventing workplace violence, aggression and harassment in the workplace, accident injury reporting and how to do that and why the corrective actions are so important, and worker hazard reporting. So if you see a hazard, report it to your supervisor, and here's the reasons why you should do it. So the intent of that was to promote corrective actions on these hazards. Number 2 item is to update and establish health and safety programs to meet board relevancy and legislation. And so that gives us an opportunity to highlight and promote some of the guidelines within our board as we upgrade them and promote them through our joint health and safety committee and then out to the schools. So ones we looked at there and we completed last year was the workplace harassment policy and procedure, if you remember from last year. This time I was here doing that. Our footwear guideline, we updated that, and that created quite a bit of conversation as we were upgrading or making changes to that. Our scent awareness guideline, we established one of those. That was a new guideline we put in place. And our school utility disruption guideline, we updated that too. Number 3 item is to continue commitment to our technology education facility program and improvements. So last year we completed our lockout, tagout instructions, or work instructions on the equipment that's in our secondary technology classrooms, how to safely lock them out and keep them locked out, what work is taking place on them. And also within our secondary, in addition to that,
All of our wood workshop programs now have saw-stop table saws in them, and that's a safety system table saw. If you ever get a chance to Google it, it's quite an amazing piece of equipment. So they've all had that in place, and that helps to mitigate any possible devastating injuries while operating a table saw. Oops. So the results we saw last year, so the combined total accident frequency, there were 143 lost time accidents and no lost time accidents for 2016-17 compared to the 129 we had the year before that. So that's an increase of 14 total accidents, or 10.8% increase. If we break that down just at looking at the lost time accidents, and again, lost time accident is an indicator of accident severity that may result in a medical or workers' compensation costs towards the board. We saw an increase there of 19 accidents, so an increase of 38% from 50 to 69. And then we're looking at just the no lost time accidents. We saw a decrease there of 5 to 74 from 79 the year before. And then we started our analysis of what actually is taking place in the workplace. So we're looking at the accident analysis. Upper Canada total accidents increased across all employee groups with the exception of secondary teachers, ECEs, and other employees. The top 2 causes were ergonomics. We went from 27 to 31. And slips, trips, and falls, we went from 32 to 37. So I'm just going to break those down in more detail here. So we're looking at the top 2. So the first one, accident locations for 37 slips, trips, and falls. Our top 3 accident locations were, in the first block there you see, or the first pie I should say, parking lots and walkways, and that was 8 accidents, or 22%. Schoolyards for 22%, and classrooms at 19%. So that's a big chunk of our pie, of the total pie. And our top 3 locations for accident locations for the 31 ergonomic strains. We looked at, again, classrooms at 26%, schoolyards, again, at 26%, and gyms were 19% of our total strains. And then we look at the different types of slips, trips, and falls. We kind of take a deeper dive here, and we're looking at where exactly are they taking place, or what types are taking place anyway. So some of the learnings we looked at, and the first one there is 51 are caused by slips on icy conditions or uneven surfaces in the workplace. So that means we continue, because of the slippery, icy conditions, our promotion and provisions of Yak Tracks, which is a slip-on safety device for boots and shoes in the schoolyards or outside. That's ongoing. We also, again, looked at workplace safety inspections at the schools, focusing on identifying and correcting potential slips, trips, and fall hazards inside and outside the board buildings or the schools. Number 2 item is 16% are student interactions. So that's students falling into workers or running into workers, or workers tripping over students. And again, one thing we looked at there too is we focused on, when we had talked to our schools, workplace safety inspections to focus on identifying the layouts of your classrooms. Is there better ways to lay out your classrooms, and then worker positioning when they're working with students. 14%, number 3 item, 14% was classroom equipment, so tripping on school equipment or improper use of equipment. So workplace inspection at the school, again, that's a great way of identifying the equipment that you could be tripping on and how to correct that. The next one's ergonomics and strains. So looking at the learnings and corrective actions or reflections there. So what did we learn from that? Well, we learned that 32% were caused by manual lifting of materials and equipment. And then another 29% were caused by manually assisting or lifting students. So one of the things, again, we focused on, and we got to focus on, is workplace inspections, right, at the school levels, at the building levels, to make sure that you're catching them on the inspections, and you're looking for corrective actions through your supervisor. Another thing we looked at too was ergonomics in the workplace. If there's some heavy lifting or equipment that needs to be moved, we should, especially on a repetitive basis, we should be contacting HR for ergonomic evaluations of that movement of equipment. And then we're looking at number 3, 23% was caused by participating in sports with students. So we talked about risk associated with playing activities with students. Consideration of risk should be assessed prior to that activity taking place. And also we looked at aggression accidents or injuries in the workplace. And 63% of those were caused by students striking or pushing workers in the workplace. So continued emphasis on monthly reporting of student aggression incidents to supervisors and the corrective actions that are part of that reporting that takes place. And then follow up with those corrective actions. Continued emphasis on BMS training, which is really important. And BMS team did a lot of training this past year, or had opportunities for a lot of training, and did lots of training too. Continued worker support of personal protective equipment for the workers who require that in the workplace. In this current year, 2017-16, some of the programs that we're currently actioning, looking at continued commitment to health and safety workplace inspections and focus on prevalent accident types and their preventions. So we have a very committed joint health and safety committee that works well in the schools. They travel to the schools and they spend time in the schools talking and working and assisting the administrative teams there. They do that twice a year, actually. They travel to all the schools to promote, and they promote the good inspections or effective inspections, and they're focusing on workplace inspection, hands-on guidance at the schools. They provide that. They're also focusing on annual health and safety rep training focus. On our annual health and safety rep training focus, we focus on safety inspection program reviews, and we're also looking at this year creating some videos on how to do health and safety workplace inspections in the school. And the communication team is going to assist us with that. Number 2 items, we're updating and establishing relevant health and safety programs. So we're updating and establishing, promoting health and safety programs that meet legislative and school board needs. So not only legislation, but also what best meets our needs in the workplace. Some programs we're working on this year is the Indoor Mold Contamination Guideline, which is a new program or new guideline. Animals in the School Guideline, which is new. Working Alone Guideline, Infectious Disease Guideline, Salting, Sanding, and Snow Removal Guideline. And then we're also, not so much a guideline, we're looking at putting in violence-free workplace signage at board buildings locations. So posted at the front entranceway and other locations throughout the school. Upgrade to, or currently number 2 item, we're upgrading our Park Lane reporting software, which you currently have. We're upgrading that, and we've started that to an online accident reporting system to better identify accidents, causes, and corrective actions, and it gives us some better ongoing data to work with rather than annual reviews. We're also looking at online workplace inspection tool to better identify hazards, assign tasks or risk, and then better controls too within that system. And also a continued commitment to technology education and the facility programs, or in the facilities within those programs. So we're looking to continue review the school tools and equipment to identify opportunities to standardize safe tools and equipment. So last year we had the SawStop go in place. This year a new piece of equipment came out associated with SawStop, which is a safety shield. Allows them to do a safer dado cut when they're making this cuts, which is sometimes require them to remove the guarding, so will stop that from happening. And that's to be installed. We've ordered those, and those will be installed. Safety lockout, tagout instructions are completed. Now we're rolling them out to the schools and looking for feedback to make sure they're effective and they're working out there. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'm going to open it up to comments or questions. Yes, Student Trustee Wilson.
Hey.
If you could briefly go back to slide, I'm not sure which one it is, but the scent awareness guideline, if you could briefly expand on that.
Yeah, sure. So the scent awareness guide, I'm not sure where that one is. Was that near the end?
It was near the beginning.
Near the beginning, eh? That's okay, I'll find it.
Second page of the review program actions, 2016-17.
I'll talk to it. So, through you, Chair.
Mm-hmm.
So the scent awareness guideline was we didn't have it in place. Has to do with different perfumes and things like that in the workplace. So in the board offices or in the schools, and what type of guidelines we can put in place to help people who do have scent sensitivities within the workplace.
Give me examples, like just sort of like an overview of those sort of.
Yeah. So let's say somebody's working in the workplace and in one of the schools, for example, would be a good example, and somebody is using a lot of personal care products, perfume, for example, and that seems to be irritating. Some people have irritation to that because they're sensitive to those scents. So in that case, they would talk to that person, or talk to their supervisor about corrective actions for that. Like, how can we stop that scent from being so strong, potentially, or how can we stop it from being in the workplace? Yeah.
Thank you very much.
No, thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Bill McPherson.
Thank you, through the chair. The safety committee has responsibility for the shops that we have within our schools, like the saw stop and things like that. Does that responsibility extend to the co-op programs that we're running, where students are actually being placed into a work environment, or does that fall under the general guidelines of the Labor Act?
Through you, Chair. So the Joint Health and Safety Committee has participation or responsibilities within the workplace. So if that student is working within our workplace, they would look after the programs to do with our workplace.
Only your workplace.
Only our workplace. If they're going off to another,
working in a heavy equipment shop,
yeah,
it falls under their.
The Occupational Health and Safety Act would be applied to that workplace. Yeah.
Second question, through the grace of the chair.
Mm-hmm.
Animals in Schools guideline, a new one. Is that talking about assistive animals, or just give me an brief explanation?
Yeah, I'd be glad to. Through you, Chair. So that one has to do with pets being, or not pets, but animals being brought into the classroom. Could be pets, but animals being brought into the classroom. So if they're hatching chickens or something like that, or if they're bringing in different types of animals into the classroom, what does that meet the curriculum of the teaching, and how long will those animals be in the school during that process?
That kind of animal.
Yeah, exactly.
Not necessarily
No, it's not to do with the, yeah, I know what you mean, but no, it's not that, yeah.
Thank you. Trustee Cram.
Thank you, Chair. Again, on slide 4, last year when you did the health and safety report, you mentioned that it was a lot of accidents pertaining to footwear.
Yes.
And I noticed you now put an upgrade to the footwear guideline.
Yes.
Can you give us an idea of what kind of changes that you were looking at, or how did that guideline change?
Yeah, so through you, Chair, so how we changed the guideline, or additions I guess we made to the guideline, had to do with the types of footwear and the type of activities. So when you're teaching an activity with physical activity, gym class, what type of footwear is expected that you'd wear, right? So not sandals, trying to get away from sandals to more of a running shoes. And if you're within the schools, to match your daily activities within any teaching or EAs or anything like that, with the type of footwear you should be wearing. So if you're handling students or working with students, you should be wearing something with a closed toe shoe on it, so there's nothing can fall onto it. Or if you're going to a tech classes or something like that, what type of footwear you should wear too. So yeah, so there was a lot of discussion on what that looks like, because there's nobody likes to change their footwear, right? You wear certain shoes, you like to keep them. So there's a lot of discussion that took place on that, but we tried to get away from the sandals. We recommended not wearing sandals in the guidelines. We recommended wearing proper footwear that was effective and safe to wear in the workplace.
Thank you. Trustee Armour.
Sure. Just a couple questions. We hear a lot about violence in the classroom and with our teachers. And so I know there's an increased focus on that. So the increase that we see year over year, could we attribute that, a bit more focus on it? The increase that we saw in the violence that was reported by your teachers?
More focus on the aggression?
Yeah, and reporting policies and things along those lines. Is that possible?
Oh, I see what you mean. Okay. Through you, Chair? I wouldn't say that we're doing a better job of reporting, so that might be part of it. We are doing a better job, which is something we wish to do, right, to find out. So the more reporting, the more corrective actions we can put in place. So that might be part of it too. But there is, we're sending up more personal protective equipment too, right? So there must be more activities taking place in the workplace too for aggression.
Just a supplementary. So maybe you could explain to me how we're doing at the board to support our teachers to make sure that, how do we teach our teachers to handle this? Because it's going to happen.
Yeah.
Right? So, let's be realistic on how we're going to support them.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. So through you, Chair, so we work closely with the special education team and the psychiatrists there and their teams, the student support partners, to find the best solutions. And those solutions are safety plans within the workplace. So if a student is aggressive or has aggressive tendencies, we put safety plans in place. That's communicated and involves the teachers, the EAs, and anybody working with that student. And they're part of that safety plan process, and they list it and they sign off on it, and they're well aware of it, and they make changes when they feel changes need to take place within that. Education, again, with the BMS is a big part of that. And if the safety plan identifies the need for personal protective equipment, arm guards or jackets, we order that and make sure that's in the workplace too. So
Superintendent Allen, do you want to add anything to that?
Through you, Chair, I think a lot of what Dennis has said has touched on it. We do training on PA days. We offer training during the school year on BMS, and as well as our student support partners going in and bringing programs within the school. So we're always reviewing and refining areas that we can improve on and bring more training to our staff to make sure that everyone is safe and we allow time for staff to review safety plans and behavior plans. Any staff going into a school, we have a protocol where they have to check into the office and review any safety plans or of students that they will be teaching that day, their occasional staff. So we have a lot of mitigating factors that we put in place to try and keep everyone safe.
Thank you. Trustee McAllister.
Thank you. I just want to pick up a little bit for now on what Trustee Armour mentioned with regard to violence in the classroom. Am I right in saying that the occupational health and safety concern is primarily with employees and not students?
Through you, Chair, we report on worker safety, yes. So it would be primarily through the workers.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Bill McPherson?
Through the Chair. I don't see it in this report, but does first aid training and AED training fall under your purview? Like, have we got an emergency defibrillator in all schools? And do we provide the training if we do?
Through you, Chair, I'm not responsible for first aid training or EAD training, but I do know we do have a trainer who takes care of that, and I know the schools, from talking to her, are up to standards.
Director, you want to continue with that comment?
Yes, Mr. Chair, through you, we offer the occupational health and safety training annually. It's our community use coordinator actually is the person who coordinates for us and is also our trained personnel that offers that training. And we did have her trained as a instructor because of the increased interest in having that certification in our schools.
Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee McDonald.
Thank you. So you've indicated that there's an increase in the lost time, but a decrease in the low lost time accidents. And in some of the the information that's in the province and different workplaces, there's a fear sometimes of individuals to report incidents. Do you have any indication that we are not seeing individuals reporting incidents within the workplace, or are we comfortable that we have an environment that when an individual is injured in any way, there's a process for them to come forward and do that reporting requirement?
Through you, Chair. There's always that opportunity for somebody who feels that, I should report this, or I don't wish to report that, but I haven't heard that at our committee meetings, so I'm not too concerned with that too much. We do promote them to report. We have a good system in place. We ask the principals and the workers when we have our meetings, especially with our health and safety reps and the administration team, to make sure that they're reporting and finding corrective actions, because that's, at the end of the day, that's going to reduce our hazards in the workplace and make the workplaces safer. So I'm not aware of that, but I know it does. In any workplace, you're going to have that to some extent.
Maybe just walk me through a process. If I slip in my school today and, nothing of it, but tomorrow I start to feel a little sore, but by Friday it's pretty painful. Yeah. Can I still report it at that point?
Yeah, through your chair, yes, you can. Yes, under occupational health and safety law and WSIB requirements, you can report that injury, and you should report that injury and fill out the corrective action form for that. We've even encouraged workers to report near misses. So if the door swings open and they could have been hit but they weren't hit, we ask them to report that too, because maybe there's something we can put in place, because likely this time they weren't hurt, but next time they may be, or somebody else may be hurt. So we encourage them to report that too, so we can find corrective actions. Yeah.
Thank you. Steve.
Mr. Chair, through you, in light of that scenario, one thing that we are also trying to grow, apart from reporting injury, is reporting hazards.
That's right.
And that's also critical, because the same employee that slipped, we don't want anybody else to slip. And so we're trying to build that capacity and understanding among our own employees about their obligation to report hazards. It goes well beyond our monthly site-based inspections, where we identify hazards and then find a process or follow the process to have them remedied. So I think that's the other side, which is the proactive measures to address what may be an acute safety condition that has come up in the workplace. Slip, trips, and falls. There are definitely connections to climate and weather, and how are we trying to manage that proactively on the days when that was an issue today, and not it was yesterday or this afternoon, and not this morning.
That's right.
Thank you.
Armor, but he just stepped out.
No,
So
no, he said no.
no, he said no. Okay.
Do I have any other comments or questions? Thank you very much, Dennis, for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving into our action items, we have 3 policy revisions, and we're going to take each one as they come forward. Each one has a motion attached to it, so we'll start with the motion, and then we'll have the director deal with those. The first is that the Upper Canada District School Board approved the recommended revision to its policy 207, which is Senior Administration Performance Management, as presented February 14th, 2018. So to get it on the floor, I need a mover and a seconder. Trustee McDonald, second by Trustee Richards. Thank you. And Director, I'll turn this over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you. This particular policy relates to performance management, as the board has heard, and it's our effort as staff to ensure that we do follow an appraisal process with all of our employees, including those who are at the senior administration level. And it's also important, as part of that process, that it is aligned with what the current practices are. In the report, trustees will see that the report mentions 2 key developments. One is how senior management appraisals have been embedded into Ontario leadership framework by the province of Ontario. And secondly, that performance management and appraisals have come in the last 4 years with a template and guide for supervisory officers or superintendents, business and academic. So, Mr. Chair, what I brought before the board tonight is a recommendation for two particular adjustments to the policy. The first is that we're recognizing that there is a provincial model that is being promoted and that school boards are directing for guiding and directing the performance management of superintendents. And that secondly, that the kinds of values that the board had identified that they thought was essential to a healthy, productive, and purposeful performance management conversation at the senior administration level is actually values that are now embedded in both the Ontario Leadership Framework and informs the Supervisory Officer Performance Appraisal Guideline, which our board has been using for 4 years now. Mr. Chair, I'll turn that back over to you.
Okay, so you have, the revisions are there. You can open it up for comments or questions. Seeing there are none, I have a motion on the floor. Yeah. Moved by Trustee McDonald and seconded by Trustee Richards that the Upper Canada District School Board approve the recommended revision to its Policy 207, Senior Administration Performance Management, as presented February 14th, 2018. I ask you to cast your votes. That carries. Thank you very much. The next policy revision is the Policy 301, which deals with social media. And I need a motion that the Upper Canada District School Board approve the recommended revisions to its Policy 301, social media, as presented February 14th, 2018. Moved by Trustee McDonald, seconded by Trustee Bill McPherson. And I'll turn this over to the Director, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, ladies and gentlemen of the board, this particular policy was brought forward by the Board of Trustees 6 years ago. It's hard to believe that technology changes as quickly as it does, but it does indeed. I believe in the board's intent at that time was to make sure that it had a high-level belief and principles statement for its organization about a particular tool and how that tool should be used by those affiliated with the organization. So in the past 6 years, the tool actually is reflecting something greater, which is about not only the ubiquitous nature of technology, it is everywhere and it's being used in all kinds of ways within our organization for learning and business purposes, and certainly for social purposes as well. It's the view of staff that it would be prudent for the board to, first of all, change the title of the policy to appropriate use of technology, and not for the board to limit its policy orientation to one particular tool or subset within that technology. Secondly, Mr. Chair, staff felt that it was important to provide a general statement about appropriate use, and that we were highlighting respect, responsibility, and lawfulness as part of what the board would expect of its employees and its students and its staff, and indeed its elected officials as well. We also wanted to make sure that we were consciously drawing links to that the board has already outlined in other policy its expectations for conduct of its students, for example, and for its staff through the school and school board code of conduct, where there are respect and civility standards. So really we're talking about wanting to make sure that students' online personalities, staff online personalities, our organization's online personalities align with what we would expect when we were in face-to-face environments: responsible, respectful, and lawful. Lastly, we wanted to make sure as a staff that in recommending changes to the board that this policy would also have a distinction between its employees and its students. This will create a helpful segue for developing a procedure that will then be the basis for the how-to that we would bring to our different workplace environments and learning environments. And it would allow us to not just address one group of end users, but in fact all people, because that is in fact our reality in our workplace and our learning environments. So I'll turn that back over to you, Mr. Chair, as an overview, and wait to see if there's any questions.
Certainly. Do we have any comments or questions on this? Student Trustee Wilson?
Through you, Chair. Just a question about the policy. When you're referring to the use of digital technology by UCDSB students, do you mean only inside of the school buildings on school hours, or do you mean their digital presence at all times?
So, Mr. Chair, through you, we of course begin with our own work, 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 begin with our own work.
Taking pictures of their classmates without parental permission. We've done videos here where we've blanked out the faces of some students. So is that covered under this, or is it something else?
Mr. Chair, through you, we understand that responsible and respectful conduct of use of technology means being a good digital citizen. And digital citizenship involves asking permission before you would film or take photos. There's a need to continue to invest in that, and the provincial curriculum gives learning opportunities to do that, to not assume that someone would be comfortable if you took their image or recorded their image, and that we recognize that we have to ask that permission of others, that in a selfie culture has been somewhat lost. So it doesn't apply, I should say, it's not articulated specifically, but it's inherent in what does it mean to be using that technology responsibly and respectfully.
Thank
you. Any other comments or questions? Trustee McDonald?
Thank you. I read this and I just think that there is something being lost a little bit here. When we originally introduced this, it was intended to be more of a statement of fact to say that we are encouraging the use, and now we've shifted the sand a little bit and said we still encourage the use, but you must do this, this, and this. So it's becoming a little bit more prescriptive in nature, in the sense that as long as you do all of these things, then you're okay. And the thought was back in the days that we do have those code of conduct policies in place that would prevail if a student was doing something on-site, off-site, that had an impact on the school, then it would still be dealt with. The other thing is that when we use the wording of use of technology rather than social media, or trying to include the internet, email, text messaging, video conferencing, social media truly is really the definition of it is online technologies or forums that are used for social networking. So are we moving away from the social aspect of it, and if you use technology but not in a social forum, that still has an impact? Like, I think there's many other policies that do apply to it. So I just getting away from the social media component and just dealing with digital communications or digital tools. I'm not sure I understand that. And I'm not sure I understand the driving force of this either.
So, Mr. Chair, through you, I appreciate the observations. A few things come to mind. in terms of the trends that appear to be happening in school boards, there has been a shift from boards that had existing policies to go a bit more global or broad than a specific example. For Upper Canada Board, we had a policy on social media. For other boards, they would have had policies about the use of computers, and they have also taken that step to change that. The second intent behind this is to flesh out, I think, what was our intentionality through policy at one time, and to build some procedural elements about what does it mean to do these things in the different types of technological spheres that we work with. When I see what procedures look like for appropriate use of technology that's out there, I get a strong sense that it's about how you treat the equipment, how you engage the equipment to engage others, and everything in between, I suppose. So our intent here was to make sure that we weren't, as an organization, giving guidance or beliefs that was restricted to one particular practice in terms of technology. I certainly understand what the genesis was at the time when the board first introduced this, and I would also say that in light of how this has worked for us, I'm unsure if whether the board has given adequate guidance about their beliefs to the wide range of end users that we have, and that regardless of whether it's social media or internet, it still would mean that we would have the same standard and expectation for its use.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Trustee Armour?
Just a quick one through you, Mr. Chair. Two, I like that we're holding our staff accountable. It's important. However, I have a question for our student trustee. When you read this, does this limit or does it make you not want to use our technology in schools? You see any problems with that? Because it's going to guide you guys, right? So have you had feedback? Did you share it with your colleagues, or I'm putting you on the spot, Marshall. So,
through you, Mr. Chair, this is the first that I've read over this policy revisement. So I've not shared this with any of my colleagues, the student senate or my student council or anything. Just from reading this and from the question that I asked the director, I don't think it limits us at all. When we're using school technology or online in school, we should be responsible what we're doing and not fooling around or doing anything bad. So I don't think it does limit us now.
Because I thought about this one a lot, because you're sitting around with a bunch of guys and women who are technology people who came into it. So, we're immigrants and you're a native, technology native. And so it's important that you get your voice heard, because this is the future, right? So, just a thought.
Through you, Mr. Chair, just to follow up, that's why I asked the director, was that the use of digital technology by UCDSB students, that was the first thing in my mind, is where do we draw the line with the policy? Is it at home? If I post something on Instagram, am I going to get talked to by a teacher tomorrow morning? But if it's just inside school property, then I don't think it limits us at all.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Okay, I have a motion on the table. It's moved by Trustee McDonald, seconded by Trustee Bill McPherson, that the Upper Canada District School Board approve the recommended revision to its Policy 301, social media, as presented February 14, 2018. I'll ask you to cast your votes, please. Carries. Thank you very much. The last policy revision is Policy 430, Safe Schools, and again I need a mover and a seconder that the Upper Canada District School Board approve the recommended revision to its Policy 430, Safe Schools, as presented February 14th, 2018. Moved by Trustee Karkner, seconded by Trustee Richards, thank you. And I'll turn it over to the director.
Mr. Chair, through you, this last report from staff involves revisiting the safe schools policy that the board has. And the purpose of that was to ensure that the policy was more aligned with the board's policy character, I believe, and that is having very clear belief and principles articulated through the policy, and that the how-to, in other words, how to carry out safe schools, is in fact articulated in the procedures that staff use as part of their administrative practices. In consulting with our legal counsel as well, legal counsel had indicated that they felt that the advice that they had is that the current policy as it stands cites excerpts from other policies or procedures, and may not necessarily, if that's the character of this policy that is desired by the board, would not then reflect the very extensive list of policies and procedures that you see that have been added to this recommended revision. So in moving forward and being aligned with both the board's tenor in their policies, and also ensuring that there's a clarity that there is quite a range of policies and commitments that the board has elsewhere that shows how the board and its staff would address and engage in maintaining and promoting safe schools. The revisions are provided that identify some more principles and beliefs that we believe helps to give the that tenor in terms of some of the developments about what is a safe school, and then also that that we provide a more extensive list of the policies and procedures that the public can read if they wish to go further about. So in a safe school matter that relates to harassment, what is the action for a safe schools issue as it relates to bullying? What is the process and the policy? And so we hope by doing that we have helped to both clarify for the public where is the follow-through on very specific issues that they may have interest or concerns about safe schools, and for the board that it helps to be more aligned with what is in fact their general tenor in all their policies.
Thank you. Comments or questions? Trustee McAllister?
I have two issues, but I'll deal with one first, and then I'll let others speak. I don't like the way the policy is structured, to be honest with you, because the previous policy did outline some beliefs and principles and featured a number of board commitments to providing safe schools, which is what the policy is all about. If I take a look at the draft as proposed, it's rather sterile. It doesn't really tell me very much as a member of the public, if I look at it, what our position is. It does tell me where to go to find more information. There's no doubt about that. But I would suggest that we couple what you have provided with what we had, or something similar to what we had.
Comments or questions? Trustee McDonald?
I think there's some wording in here that is not really relevant. It doesn't really add to the value of the policy. So the comments of more than a decade in Ontario, key principles, and so on to the bottom. In the last paragraph that's in blue, it indicates that the director shall be responsible to the Board of Trustees for the implementation of the board's policies. This is a policy about safe schools, and if we're talking about all policies, then that should be in the director's policy. So I think that's irrelevant as well. It's a given. We have a policy that says the director enforces our policies. I don't think it should be embedded within safe schools. And I don't know that I guess it's the second paragraph is required with the bullets.
Trustee Bill McPherson.
Yeah, muddy the water some more here. My feeling is the Safe Schools Act should refer to the day-to-day operation of schools. Trustee McDonald alluded to this. Pretty much standard in Ontario. Anyway.
Trustee McAllister?
I agree with both Trustee McPherson, Trustee McDonald. That, and I'm recommending, my recommendation is that this policy be referred back to the senior team and the director for further revision and precision.
I'll move. I'll second it, sorry.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table. I'm going to ask you to cast you get a motion for that too. We have the wording for that, Lisa? It was kind of the feeling I was getting as we were listening to the discussion.
Question, Chair?
Yes?
When is it being referred back to? I don't know who it's being referred back
Yeah,
to. When is it being referred
We'll see if we can
back
get a date on that.
Next meeting?
Next meeting? Enough time?
In March, perhaps?
March? Okay.
March? First meeting in March? March, what is it? March 7th?
How about the second meeting in March then?
Second meeting?
28th.
Do you need more clarification on what's being asked?
Yes, do you need some more clarity in terms of what?
Mr. Chair, yes, just maybe one, oh, you mean in terms of the motion?
No, well, in terms of what the trustees are looking for here.
Perhaps not at this time, but maybe to perhaps to begin the conversation at Management Council, just to make sure that it's clearer as a way of bouncing off some of the efforts to have a second run at this.
Yeah, we certainly have on record what we heard here tonight. You know, this is taped, so we've got that as well, the concerns that were brought forward. So I have a motion in front of me that the move this one, Trustee Allister and Trustee McDonald, that the Upper Canada District School Board refer back policy 430 safe schools for further review by senior administration and bring back to the board meeting of March 28th, 2018. I ask you to cast your votes on that, please.
Send this one.
We didn't accept that. We're sending it
Take
back.
this top motion here. Trustee Emmer?
So what we have
Just mesmerized.
I think there's a mover should be.
Yeah.
That carries, thank you. Trustee.
I know you're good, David, but
All right, that carries. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, moving on to the next item. Before I...
Excuse me, Chair?
point of order.
Point of order. I had a second issue, which I mentioned with regard to this policy, and I'm wondering if you would allow me to elaborate.
Well, the motion has been passed that it's going to go back. Is it going to help bring clarity to...
It might. It concerns violence in the classroom.
Okay. Certainly, I'll give you some latitude. Okay.
I raised this on behalf of a number of parents and school councils who have brought it to my attention. There's no doubt that there is increased violence in the classroom for various reasons, some of which is, it manifests itself in many ways, in physical, emotional, and psychological ways. And sometimes the model in education in this board and in the province and in all schools in the province is a very inclusive one there now. And it means that we are dealing with students that 20 years ago perhaps we never had to deal with. And I say that is a very good thing, because what's good for some is good for all. However, there are issues that come out, communication issues. There are triggers sometimes in behavior that are missed, which result in a great deal of disruption
than other years. And for a variety of reasons, we were not able to get as many trustees as I wanted. Currently, I could only get a little over half of the trustees, and it's important for me that all trustees, or as many that can possibly attend, because these are very valuable opportunities for us to get together and share our vision and our thoughts on some very critical and very important topics. So because I'm having a challenge this year getting everyone in February, what I am asking is that you give me the opportunity by suspending Article 5.15 of the Upper Canada Board of Bylaws to allow the trustee planning session to be rescheduled from February 23rd and 24th, 2018 to a future date in April. March is a very difficult month as well, but I can't bring this motion forward unless I have a clear understanding from you that you are okay that I bring this motion forward. And I can see by the head's shaking that it won't be a problem. Trustee Armour's got a tie on. He has a concern.
It's just, can I speak?
Certainly.
Just a thought. Like if the school year is almost over by April. So if we can't, to me it seems kind of silly to have a planning session in April. But I understand people are busy.
If we go, thank you. So I'm going to ask for a mover and a seconder of this motion, and we'll have another quick discussion on it. So it would be a motion that the Upper Canada District School Board suspend Article 5.15 planning session of the Upper Canada Board bylaws to allow trustee planning session to be rescheduled from February 23rd to 24th, 2018 to a future date in April 2018. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Trustee Bill McPherson.
John.
Trustee McAllister. Thank you for your point on that, Trustee Armour. Anyone else? Trustee McAllister?
I understand Trustee Armour's concern that it may seem counterintuitive to have the planning session in April at a time when the year is almost over. However, I think we have to understand that our work is ongoing and that there's a lot of direction and strategy that we can benefit from even in April for the balance of the year or for next year.
Thank you.
Just my thought.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Trustee Cram.
Thank you, Chair. A suggestion that it be early April, and we'll need, because the election open for nominations for the next school year becomes May 1st, and I would like to see something planned for the new board, because it would have to go farther than that and wait until we find out whether there may be changes.
I certainly would make every effort to make it early April.
Just a suggestion.
But again, it's a matter of looking at, there's a lot of things that happen. If in early April, whenever we set the date, we're at 6, we're still going to have to go ahead. I won't go beyond April, certainly. And I'll make every attempt to make it as early as I can, but I'll be working with Lisa on this and the director to be able to coordinate this as well.
Can I just point out some commitments we might have in the month of April? We have regional
April 7th.
April 7th,
Mm-hmm.
and board of directors for our director, and mental health summit is coming up on the following weekend.
Thank you. So I will.
You're going to add some time? At a weekend?
Yeah. All right, but I still have the motion on the table. So are there any other comments or questions? Trustee Bill McPherson?
I realize I'm in a kind of unique position, and in that Fridays do not work simply because the employment I have, we are simply being asked not to take time off. Doesn't have to be a weekend thing, or weekends you're asking us to take time away from families. There is a lot of these extracurricular events happen on the weekends. Is it not something that we could consider doing, say, during the week? Doesn't have to be 2 consecutive sessions, or can it be 2 sessions?
I don't think it has to be, but we always are finished by noon on Saturday.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that you're calling us in on a Friday, which means travel time, which for some means overnight, some mean it's a commute. If we took one day, like when I first came on the board, we would have all-day planning sessions on a Saturday. You started at 8 in the morning, and you were on the road home at 4 o'clock. Instead of, yes, some people choose to stay overnight. Other people chose to drive in the mornings. And I think that you should be allowed a fair amount of flexibility in planning it.
I don't think there's anything written in the bylaws that says exactly how it happens. Let me work with my vice chairs on this one to consider that. Trustee McDonald?
The only thing I was going to offer, Mr. Chair, was that you've narrowed the window, and maybe we allow the flexibility to say it be held before May, so then it allows you to figure out when you want it. So it includes April, but if you can find a way to do it, then you have the flexibility to do that. That's all I was going to suggest, so that you're not.
You're feeling for me, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, we run out of runway, right? At some point, I mean, before you know it, it's going to be March 15th again. Like, it's 30 days away, and
If we say a future date in April, I mean, that could be any time in April, would be before May, right?
that's all I was suggesting. Because maybe we find a date at the end of March. I don't know. Like, it's just give you the flexibility.
All right, before a future date before
May 2018.
All right. And then the format of it, we can have a continued discussion. But right now, let's have the motion. It is moved by Trustee Bill McPherson, seconded by Trustee McAllister, that the Upper Canada District School Board suspend Article 5.5 or 515 planning session of the Upper Canada Board bylaws to allow the trustee planning session to be rescheduled from February 23rd-24th, 2018 to a future date before May 2018. Can you cast your votes, please? And that carries. Thank you very much. Moving on to the next item, which is a request to amend the Upper Canada District School Board bylaws. And I'm going to turn this over to Trustee Cram, who is chair of the bylaw committee. There is a motion that I will put on the table first. And I need a mover and a seconder that the Upper Canada District School Board approve the board bylaws as presented February 14, 2018, with an effective date of March 7, 2018, with the elimination of the second vice chair position to be effective December the 1st, 2018. Do I have a mover? Trustee Cram, a seconder. Trustee Richards. And I'll turn this over to Trustee Cram.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I do need to thank Susan and Jeff and Carol and Lisa for the involvement they've had on the committee with the ideas that they've had. We have had a total of 7 meetings altogether. With the first report that we brought back to the board on October 11th, there were 4 instances, I believe, or 4 areas that trustees at that point brought forward some concerns. One was the date of implementation. One was the role of management council. There was the deletion of the second vice president. and also attendance at board meetings. In your package, you have a copy of the bylaws, if they were approved tonight, what they would look like. In our research, we were very impressed with the format of the bylaws that took place for the Greater Essex School Board, and so have tried to adopt that format with our ideas and tried to reformat what we have so it would also fit on board docs and be easily researchable and easily people could find what they wanted. When we did it, there are 20 boards that we did research and look at the bylaws that they have. Those boards are listed here. Predominantly, we looked at school boards, I think, had between 80 schools and 100 schools. We took that particular area so that they were somewhat within the range of where we are. And we also looked at how they set the agenda. And you can see that it varies from the chair only to the chair and the director, chair, vice chair, and the director, and so on, as you can see on the list that's up there. And we also looked at researching the attendance and saw that these are the boards that we had particularly found wording in their bylaws, with the exception of Greater Essex, because they added additional words, should be the exception, and Ottawa Carleton, where the additional words were under extenuating circumstances. Predominantly, all of those boards also followed the Education Act and the requirements in the Education Act for attendance at board meetings, and so we've basically decided that we would try to adopt the language that was in the Education Act. What I've tried to do with it is to group policies together so we could stick to a theme. The policies listed here basically just have grammatical errors that we either changed an "a" to a "the" or that kind of grammatical errors, or it was renumbered because of the reformatting that we were trying to do. We did decide when we looked at other boards' bylaws that we should be also putting in who and the roles of particular people. So the officers of the school board, the chair, the vice chair, the director of education, the secretary of the board, and the treasurer. I believe in the previous bylaws, the director of education was separate from the secretary of the board, and we decided we would just put them together because that, in fact, is the director's title, even though it's in two different areas. The signing officers would be the chair, the vice chair, again, the director of education, secretary of the board, just as the previous one was, and the treasurer. Then we've taken each of the areas of our board of trustees and broken them down to the duties that each of those people should have. It does basically follow Education Act. And the wording, it's in the Education Act. We will have some new trustees. We possibly could have some new trustees coming in place within the next year, and it certainly would give a quicker way of letting them know what the duties of each of the particular people was, including on the duties of the director of education. Sometimes people don't know what that is, and what the role of the individual trustee is. So we've included all of those in the draft that we're presenting to you tonight. We've then gone into the inaugural and organizational meetings, and what we changed here was, in our own bylaws, we've got the vacancy of the chair in a completely different spot than in our organizational meetings. But the process under which we elected each of those particulars was exactly the same. It just happened to be repeated 3 and 4 and 5 times. So by doing at the inaugural organization meeting, adding the words, and at the first meeting following a vacancy in the chair, and then upon election, the successful candidate shall assume the chair. By putting them in there, that we've allowed to eliminate part of the bylaw that we have now, but keep it in with the context of what we wanted. In the inaugural meeting, Basically, what we've done is added 6, 7, and 8 from other areas of our bylaws. The example in number 6, the appointment of the nominating committee. What we've done is attached Appendix B, which we did have before, but not in quite the same format. That by appointing the nominating committee, it gives them a specific role that they need to do with specific tasks. And in Appendix B, which I think Lisa has put in further on down, it gives what the committees are and what
by the director with conversations with the remaining trustees or the committee that worked on the actual orientation package.
Yeah.
But I see where Trustee Cram is coming from. He wants to see an orientation session for new trustees, but we have to have something in place first in order for that to happen, and it behooves us as trustees, I think, to be a major part of that planning, along with our trustee liaison officer and our director. And we may call in our senior team at times to give us some advice on the creation of that. But that doesn't say it in the bylaws, but I don't know how you work that in. We'd have to.
And we do know that OPSPA offers the...
Definitely, there's a
so
major...
OPSPA was a huge player in this. Trustee Armour?
I agree that we need to have something in writing for our orientation, because it was fairly weak the last time we did it. It was more along the lines of the legality side. And so my worry is that if we do put in the hands of the former director, whoever that might be, if it's you, director or not, that same orientation would be had again. And so I would like to see a trustee on there too as well, or something. That's important.
basically the concept was Jeff would get 2 or 3 people together, trustees, senior admin, whatever, to draw up that orientation session that would be offered in June to all trustees, not just necessarily the new ones, but all trustees and specifically for new ones. And it would be how our own board operates as opposed to the legalities of it, because I know for me it took 1.5 years to get all the nuances of what the UCDSB is doing as opposed to what the legalities of my position would.
I agree.
Thank you. Trustee McDonald.
Thank you. Well, I've said a lot before about this, but I have some more to say tonight. And I think, difficulty that I have when we look at bylaws is bylaws are how we conduct ourselves in the organization. And if you want to be putting bylaws in place and allow them to be very ambiguous and allow for flexibility, then it shouldn't be a bylaw. Because if you're trying to say this is what we intended to do, then you haven't done your job as far as creating the wording of the bylaw. The bylaw should be undoubtedly understood if you read it, this is what's happening. So if the intent was to do something, allow the chair to do that, allow the chair to do this, it didn't capture it. I'm sorry. The other thing is that if we make changes, there seems to be, or there at least ought to be, a reason for the change. Something's not working, something can be improved. I don't see evidence in all of the research other than the fact that A, B, and C does or doesn't do something. Doesn't indicate that it's better. It just says this is what they do. There's no indication that what you're doing is going to help us operate or function as a board. Whether you have a second vice chair, don't have a second vice chair, or whether you intend to make people come to meetings every quarter. And to speak to that a little further, I think that's a little dangerous. It's a slippery slope for us. A number of things in here appear to be punitive. But this one in particular seems to be more punitive, because if a community elects someone under the basis and the foundation that they will attend the requirements under the legislation, and the community is satisfactory with that, who are we to judge that community? Are we now going to look and put bylaws in place that every trustee must ask one question at every meeting? Some trustees ask many questions. Some trustees ask no questions. Some trustees do not partake in debate or dialogue at a meeting. But communities put people in place to represent them based on what they've done, track record, and what they propose to do for their communities. I think the work that's been done here, there's no indication that it's going to help the board. There's no indication that there was something wrong. I go back to my comments that it's punitive and that it is simply directed at a couple of trustees only, and that I will not support this.
Thank you. Trustee Bill McPherson.
Section 515. I think we need a little clarification here. We're talking about regular and special meetings of the board. Members of the board are expected to attend all regular and special meetings of the board either in person or through electronic means. I would like to see that. I'm not just sure that that's as clear as I think it should be. You can attend a meeting. I guess I'm looking for the word participate. Like I know I can view a meeting on my computer and basically do nothing. I'm just, maybe I'm picking at straws here. But I'd like to see a little bit of a definition of the word special. But special meetings do not count towards our attendance. Am I correct in that? It's only the 2 meetings of each month. And I'm just wondering about the physically present thing. We're putting a 4-month period in. 2 months of that 12-month period are usually summer off. So I'm just not sure that this is as clear as it should be. And at the same time, picking up a wee bit on what David said, that the people that we ultimately answer to as to our attendance at this table and our participation is not our fellow trustees. It is those people back home that we represent at this table. And no matter how many times you attend or not attend a meeting, if they are satisfied with your performance, it is their call and not necessarily ours. I think we should align this strictly with the ministry guidelines so that it does not appear punitive. And I think we need a wee bit more clarification over which meetings we're counting now. I do say 3 consecutive regular meetings. I'd just like to see this tweaked a wee bit.
Mr. Craig?
The wording of the attendance portion is the actual wording in the Education Act. No variation from it.
Okay. Sorry, yeah. Trustee Kirkner?
Could I just ask for clarification from Ms. Workman about the special meetings? I believe they do count.
Under Article 5.25, it states for the purpose of trustee attendance, special meetings are considered regular meetings.
Okay, so now we're talking all meetings. So during, excuse me if I'm rounding off, but if during budget time, we end up cracking first Wednesday, second Wednesday, third Wednesday, and fourth Wednesday, which is not unprecedented, then that they all count the same, whether they're the regular scheduled meetings or meetings called ad hoc. Now, do you have to conduct business at a special meeting? In other words, we could potentially have a special meeting that could be considered something besides day-to-day operation of the board. Does that count? Or is that picking at hairs?
Never occurred. It's never occurred. I think I think you're picking a little bit there. I mean,
Okay, I'll
usually
withdraw.
anything we do is conducting business, if we were to do a special meeting there. Okay, Trustee McAllister, and we'll come back to Trustee McPherson, I think he's got more.
I'd like to refer to attachment 4, which is Schedule B. If I can find it. Had it. Under each of the, for example, the Audit Committee, the Parent Involvement Committee, the Special Education Advisory Committee, Supervised Alternative Learning Committee, those 4 at least, have a reference to the regulation, which is 374 or whatever it is. For the Suspension and Expulsion Committee, there is no allusion to a regulation, and I do believe there is one. And I'd like to perhaps get some opinion from the director.
Mr. Chair, through you, there's acts and there's regulations. So the Education Act in Section 311 of the Act would speak to expulsion, and Section 310 would speak to suspensions. And in the Act, it also says that suspensions and expulsions will be heard by the board. And then further into the Act, it makes a distinction that the board may delegate that responsibility to a committee.
So, Chair, could I ask Trustee Cram a question? Would you consider that as an amendment?
I think anything that anybody wants to change in the bylaws should be done by an amendment through this particular
No,
board.
but I'm asking, is it
You
pertinent?
mean to add the word, add the acts or the regulations?
Yes.
Of course it is.
Okay, it's relevant.
Yeah.
Okay. Whatever the director cited, 310, 300.
So it's going to be an amendment to that particular section.
So I'd like to make that amendment if I could, Chair.
Thank you. We need a motion on that?
Yes.
So are you removing it? Do I have a seconder on that? Trustee Cartner? So the amendment is, Tom? So what's the point here?
You have not passed appendix B.
We haven't passed anything at this point.
Unless we want to change the, before you pass it.
I mean, amendment.
Change the article itself first.
Pardon me?
I think we can change the article itself first, which is
So we're going to make an amendment to the article? Is that what you're saying? Just want to make sure we're doing this right. Yep.
You're making a note.
So we're making an amendment to the main motion.
That's correct.
All right. So we're making an amendment to the main motion. Which is going to include this change in that section there.
Three eleven.
Okay, do I have, I had a mover, trustee McAllister and trustee Cartner, that the Upper Canada District School Board approve the board bylaws as presented. Okay, so we can't go there, we just got to approve the amendment. Otherwise, we're approving the policy. We're not going there yet.
It's in Article 465, is it not?
We're approving the regulation 311.
Right.
Yes. All right, so that the Upper Canada District School Board amend the board bylaws as presented February 14th with an effective date of March the 7th with the elimination of, right now this still looks like no, we're not voting on an amendment. We're still with the main motion, but my fear is we're voting on a motion we're not ready to vote on yet. So we're only looking at an amendment. Trustee Graham?
You've got the main motion on the floor, and you want to amend it. Now, I'm going to making a suggestion, is that your beginning is the Upper Canada School Board, amend Appendix B.
In the main motion.
In the main motion to include Section 1 of expulsion, suspension and expulsion committee, Section 1 to include Regulation 311, is that it? And renumber the other ones. So basically, you're just voting on an amendment for that section.
That's all I want to do is vote on an amendment.
Yeah. Because you can amend any part of this bylaw, the draft.
Yeah.
Because the main motion's already on the floor.
Well, yeah, but I just want to be careful I don't end up
Agree.
calling a vote on what I should be.
You forget the main motion, you just pass an amendment.
That's right. We are ready on this one now, do you think?
Just a point. Right?
Yeah, go ahead.
If you're making a change to the appendix is a living document that is outside of the bylaw. So the appendix can be adjusted from time to time to reflect what is transpired.
So it doesn't necessarily need a vote on it. But I'm beginning to think that it's not something that we need to bring to the table right now, because we would include that in our bylaws because it's relevant. Right? Trustee McPherson?
I think we need to go back to 515 and clarify that special meetings count towards attendance, as she alluded to in the regulations, because this does not define it as it's stated. It simply refers to regular meetings and not special meetings. So we need to put a line in stating that special meetings of board count for attendance as well. So I guess that's an amendment to the main motion.
So that would be an amendment to the main motion. But the other was just adding a regulation that was part of an appendix.
David was right on that one. It's because it's an appendix.
All
It's
right,
not
so
part of the bylaw.
Trustee Bill McPherson, we're looking at an amendment to 5.15?
Yes, to clarify the attendance and that the special meetings count as regular meetings.
It's, excuse me, Chair,
Simply, we just took out regular and special and set all meetings of the board.
look at 525.
515.
25.
Trustee McDonald?
May I?
You certainly can.
So if we refer to the Education Act, Section 229, Sub 1, despite Section 208, 1, but subject to subsection 2, a member of a board shall be physically present in the meeting room of the board for at least 3 regular meetings of the board in each 12-month period beginning December 1st. That is the Education Act. I'll go on, despite subsection 208-1, for the period beginning when a member of a board is elected or appointed to fill a vacancy and ending in the following November 30th, the member shall be physically present in the meeting room of the board for at least 1 regular meeting of the board for each period of 4 full calendar months that occurs during the period beginning with the election or appointment and ending on the following November 30th. The Education Act is not the exact wording that's in the bylaw.
Okay, it's becoming very apparent to me that we're not ready to move this thing forward. Simply because there's wording changes that we have to make. We could be here all night long making changes. I think we need to take a good look at the Education Act, make sure we lock directly in with that. This is certainly something that needs to come to board, needs to come back. In order to do that, I need a motion to refer this to another time. So we take it back. Do I have, bring that forward? Table it.
I moved to table the motion.
Bill McPherson, do I have a seconder? Trustee Richards. Okay, so a motion that the Upper Canada School Board table.
No, I don't want to table it.
Pardon me?
I don't want to table it. Table it means you're never bringing it back.
We're not tabling it. It's got to come back.
If it's up to them, whether they think they can clean up the
Deferred. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the word I wrote.
Can I get a motion on deferred?
deferred.
Deferred? Deferred, fine. Okay, so I have a motion that the Upper Canada District School Board defer. I mean, we need a date. Movers.
May?
Second meeting in May?
Up to
Second meeting in May. Thank you. Okay, so I have moved by Trustee Bill McPherson, seconded by Trustee Richards. The Upper Canada District School Board defer the Upper Canada Board bylaw discussion to the second regular board meeting in May. Can I ask you to cast your votes on that, please? And that carries. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on. Director, do you have some comments?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, we're starting in our schools the second semester of the new academic year, or I should say the new semester in our secondary schools. And we want to wish all of our students well as they start moving forward. We want to also recognize that the senior staff are spending more time in schools as we've started up both the new semester and in our elementary schools the new term. And that is certainly the expectation of the board, that its senior staff has a presence in schools, engaging in discussions related to student learning and student well-being. We had a very robust conversation recently at the staff level last week about how are those conversations being punctuated by evidence and being informed by what both the superintendents, the principals see in their work, and to help to model that in our daily work, including school visits. So it's really important that the board knows that the SIPSA that schools create are based on conversations around not just about the plan, but the evidence about how that plan is moving forward. And the board's board improvement plan, the BIPSA, is an anchor document that also is informed in evidence as well. We look forward to bringing back to the board in the late spring an update about the BIPSA and how that has been implemented, and that will also include some of that evidence that we've picked up over the course of school visits.
Thank you, Director. I just have one thing I do want to mention, and I know Trustee Armour, you were pretty proud of what is happening down in South Dundas, and the municipality of South Dundas received a Provincial Economic Development Award for a partnership that they have, involving Ross videos. It's always nice to be able, as a board, to be able to partnership with our communities and some of our workers within the communities, especially when it enhances work that we're already doing in our school. And a lot of the stuff that was happening at Seaway, we're doing a wonderful job there, and this just helps us do an even better job. So I want to congratulate them as well, but also pat ourselves on the back because of being open to those kind of partnerships. And we're always open to those kind of things, especially when they're in the best interest of our kids. Okay. I need a motion that the Upper Canada District School Board move into Committee of the Whole, February the 14th, moved by Trustee Bill McPherson, seconded by Trustee McDonald. Cast your votes, please. And that carries. Thank you. I also need a motion that the Committee of the Whole move into private session, moved by Trustee Richards, seconded by Trustee McAllister. Again, cast your votes, please. And that carries. I think. Just a second, I jumped the gun.